Yeah, I want to talk about bereavement. I think it's a sticky subject, isn't it? And it's people steer clear of talking about it because it's dismal, and sad and uncomfortable. And quite often when we are bereft, because people don't know what to say to us, they kind of give us a wide berth, and that really makes it even worse. And I came to have a particular interest in bereavement after having my own bereavement, and the interest I have in it is really helping people to come to terms with perhaps the not quite so good thoughts they had about the person that they'd lost. People that regretted things that had happened in a relationship, people that had unrequited dreams that they felt should have happened and didn't for all the reasons. People that actually didn't like the person that had passed, and that's a really big one to unpack, to vocalise that part of you could be relieved. And when you carry that around with you, it doesn't go away, it just grows. You can bury it for a while, but then it just grows and it festers. And I started working with a lady actually originally, one of my first clients, who came to me because she was bereft. And she'd lost her husband, and about a year previously, and she said, I'm just not getting over it. I can't get over this. And so we started working together. And as the session went on, and subsequent sessions, it came about, they'd been married for about 40 something years. It's a long time. They'd got children, they'd got a successful business, a beautiful house, played golf together and all the bits and pieces. And she said something that was so profound in the first session. She said, basically, we had a good marriage. And if ever there was a word that was packed full of gelignite, emotional gelignite, it was that basically we had a good marriage. So we worked together, and it transpired that they hadn't had a happy relationship. They were quite ill-matched. They'd been sort of pushed into getting married by family. It was the right thing to do. I think she was expecting their first child. And they were good friends, but they didn't ever really have that sort of volcanic emotional relationship that some people enjoy. And they weren't getting on at all well, and she had the opportunity to have a fling. And she turned it down. She turned the opportunity down. She felt it wasn't the right thing to do for all the reasons. And in her words, she said, and less than 2 years after that, my husband passed away and beat me to it. So, in her words, he'd beaten her to getting out of the relationship. So her grief was compounded by huge amounts of guilt and resentment and regret. And she was really bitter. She was bitter at her husband for dying. She was bitter at her husband for who he was and how he'd been. She was bitter with herself. She was bitter with the world. And we had such a good outcome to her coaching that she was able to forgive herself. She was able to forgive her late husband. She had got 2 lovely kids out of the relationship, a lovely home, friends. And she said, now I've talked all this through and worked it through, she found peace. She found that peace that she so desperately needed. And that's the key to this, I think, is it isn't the fact that the person necessarily has passed away. It's all of the stuff that they've left behind and all of the dreams that they've taken with them. That's the bit that hurts. And that's the bit that we bury because of all these feelings. This lady was burying feelings of guilt and shame and regret. They're not feelings that are attractive. They're not feelings we like to boast about. So we kind of park them and hope that they go away. And it had such a profound effect on her. And she's now gone on to really live her best life, and she feels absolutely okay with everything. I then worked with another person who she'd lost her mum, and again she just couldn't get over it, and she came to me for some coaching. And when we spoke, her mum had her and her older sibling, and the older sibling had always been, in my client's words, the wild one, done her own thing, travelled, gone and done what she wanted to do. And my client had always been, in her words, the shy, retiring one who stayed at home. And she was there with her mum pretty much all of the time. The older sibling travelling the world and living a life of fun, and that's what my client assumed, deduced. And when mum got ill, in her words, older sibling came hurtling back into her world, commandeered mum's attention, and my client was feeling really, really miffed because she felt entitled. She felt as if she'd done all of the work and got nothing back. And for that, again, it wasn't about mum passing. That in itself is, of course it's going to bring on grief, of course it is. But it wasn't that about that. Why she couldn't let go of it was she was so cross with her sibling, and so cross with herself at feeling cross with her sibling, that she just couldn't get past it. So again, we went right the way back. We talked about childhood, we talked about stuff that had influenced her thinking. And in a nutshell, she felt really jealous that the older sibling had escaped from the mundane life of staying with parent. And once we talked through that she had her own choice but decided to stay with parent, sister had decided not to stay, so they had both executed their own choices. But hers didn't have the happy outcome when, in her words, the sister came back in and commandeered the last few months. So when we actually looked at it from mum's perspective, we did some hypnosis, which was lovely, some healing hypnosis, and looked at it from mum's perspective as well. Think about what mum would have wanted. Would mum not have wanted to see the wayward sibling? Would mum not have wanted to finish her life with both of her children present? And she said, when we put it like that, of course she would. I then had a really, really lovely message from her not long afterwards, saying that her and her sibling had, for the first time ever, gone to mum's grave together for Mother's Day and put some flowers on, and they'd had a lunch together afterwards. And she said it spring cleaned all of those damaging negative thoughts she had. So it's enough to be bereft, isn't it? It's enough to be bereft without carrying all that stuff around as well. And I think the important thing about bereavement coaching is that it isn't all about going backwards. It isn't all about going backwards to what happened, the event, and how it's left you feeling. It's what's going on around that, and how are we going to move forwards? Because whatever we do, that person's not coming back. And once we've got past that, acceptance of that, whatever that looks like and feels like and sounds like, they're not coming back. We can then move on to cope and make sense of all of the other feelings surrounding that.